So the first topic I want to talk about is that this past Friday was the second biggest day in box office history. I love seeing this as a movie fan. You had Moana 2 that opened this past weekend, and you had Wicked Part 1 and Gladiator 2 on the second week. So you had like three big choices to choose from. And I love the fact that even during the holidays, if you get people excited for movies, you make them feel like event movies, people are still going to go out to the theaters. And this also goes back to the fact that, because I know this year started off slow for the box office, but you did have box office hits earlier this year. Like you had Doom Part 2, which made over 700, which was a big hit. You had Godzilla X Kong New Empire, which made over 500. You had Kung Fu Panda 4, which made some money. You had Deadpool and Ween. But I know like when Fall Guy and Furiosa came out, people like, just like based on those two movies, people were saying, oh, the theaters, people aren't going to the theaters. To me, it's all about if you mark, Transformers 1 was didn't do well, which I think those do so much better. But it all comes down to like marketing. You gotta market your movie really well, really well. You gotta get people excited. You gotta make it feel like an event. And I think the marketing did did a great job for all three of these movies. Outside of Gladiator 2, I felt like the first trailer used like a really big song choice. But I think these were the movies that everybody and a lot of people were excited for. And it's just great to see this as a movie fan. So for Moana 2, it opened at 225, which I am not surprised by that. The first Moana movie is fantastic. I love that movie. It's a very beloved movie. And I think I've seen articles where it said it's one of the biggest hits on whatever streaming services on the first Moana. And the first Moana made like over 600, like in the 600, 60, I think 668. So the first movie made a lot of money, and it's, like I said, a beloved movie. So I knew that Moana 2 was gonna make a lot of money. And it's funny because I think that started out as a Disney Plus TV series or Disney Plus movie, and they decided to put it in theaters, which was definitely the right choice. Which is why I'm glad Bob Iger is back. But that was definitely the right choice, and the movie's already made over 300 in its first week. I could definitely see Moana 2 making a billion depending on how the drop off is in the second week. I still have to see Moana 2 as someone who loves the first one. I'm definitely going to check out the sequel at some point this month. I'm going to try to see it, but I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see the box office doing well. I'm glad to see that one's doing well. And then the second part of the box office is Wicked, which I think this is also pretty big. Wicked was open to 114, which had a big opening in its first week. It only took a 28% drop off in the second week, which is crazy. Like the movie made 80, 81 in the second week, Wicked Part 1. And it just goes to show how strong word of mouth can be sometimes, and how some people are going back to see it multiple times. And that's another thing too, is like, if you can have a movie where people go back multiple times to see it, that definitely helps. And I feel like Wicked is getting this great word of mouth, and it's a movie I highly recommend go check out, Wicked Part 1. But that's like, I don't think I've ever heard of that happening where a movie only took a 29% drop off in a second, 29% drop off in a second week when it had a big opening. Because most movies, when they open over 100 or 200 area, you kind of expect those movies to take like a little bit of a big drop off, and not as a negative, just because it's like a lot of people, it meant a lot of people went out the first week to go and see it. And the fact this movie opened to 114 and made 80, 81 and took only a 28% drop off in the second week, Wicked Part 1, it just goes to show how people are going back to see this movie multiple times. And that's definitely like, I'm shocked at how much of a only like how it only took that much of a small drop off, and I'm so happy for this movie because Wicked Part 1 deserves it, and it's a fantastic movie. I highly recommend. And what I mean by shock is just I don't think I've ever seen a movie have that much of a like small drop off in the second week after opening really big. But I highly recommend go check out Wicked Part 1 in theaters. Fantastic movie. The third part of it is Gladiator 2, which I wasn't a fan of, but I gotta give credit for Gladiator 2. The fact you still had Wicked in theaters, you got Mario 2 that came out. That movie only took a 44% drop off, pretty which is really good actually. Like it's getting decent reviews, but it's not getting amazing reviews from critics. But I know I've seen a couple of movies where people were having fun with it. So even though I didn't like the movie Gladiator 2, I found it really bad and a disappointment, and one of the worst movies of the year for me personally. I am happy that a lot of people are going to theaters to see it, and for me personally, even if I don't like a movie, I'm always happy when a movie's doing well just for the theaters and they keep the theaters going. So, but I think that's pretty impressive that that movie only took a 40% drop off. Like, it's not as impressive as Wicked. I think Wicked Part 1 was just crazy, but it's still pretty good considering what it's facing. And that made 30 in the second week. So you had just this trio where people were going, where you had a big weekend, and I can see why it was the second biggest Friday in box office history, because I also think it's really cool is that you have three movies here that are so different from each other. Where you have Mono 2, an animated movie, you have Wicked Part 1, a musical movie, and you have Gladiator 2. A more like blockbuster action movies. So I love the fact you have just three different movies too. Now with Gladiator 2, I will say this, even though it took a really good drop off in the second week, and I believe the movie's made over 300. Same with I think Wicked Part 1 is in the 350 area. Gladiator 2 still needs to definitely make more to break even though, because I know Gladiator 2's budget was like in the 300 area plus marketing. So I definitely give it credit for the fact it took like a really good, like a pretty good drop off in the second week, considering what it's facing. It still has definitely a little bit to go before it will break even to be considered a success based on its budget and how much they spent on marketing. But overall, it was a great week for the box office, and like I said, I'm definitely gonna try Sumana 2. I definitely recommend Wicked Part 1. And like I said, even though I didn't like Gladiator 2, I am happy that it's contributing to the box office doing well. So the next topic I'm going to talk about is Sony put out the first 8 minutes of Kraven the Hunter. Now, I haven't been excited for this movie at all, personally. And I don't think anybody is, honestly, because of just how the Sonyverse movies quality has been, and the fact it's tracking to open between 2025. I know some people say this is desperate, but I don't really find this to be desperate because a lot of studios would do that often lately when they put out like the first few minutes of a movie. Like the Lord Wings animated movie just did that after Kraven the Hunter. So I don't really find that to come off as desperate. Like I do think Sony's desperate, but I feel like studios are doing that more lately with movies where they're like dropping the first few minutes online. So I don't really call it completely desperate on it. They're completely desperate, but yeah, I would say Sony is desperate in the sense that with the tracking coming out for this movie, definitely they're trying to get more people to see it, especially with the director Craven saying that give this movie a chance based on like the director saying based on the fact that he knows that people won't ha- weren't happy with the previous Sonyverse Spider-Verse movies. But when it comes to these first 8 minutes, I think the first 8 minutes, at least this scene, I think is fine. It didn't do nothing for me personally. It didn't make me any more excited or less excited for this Craven movie. Like my excitement is not really high for this movie. And look, I hope this movie. I'm probably gonna end up seeing it because it is based on a Marvel character. But I will admit, this is the first time for a Marvel movie where I just have no interest or zero excitement for a movie. Like, I'll go see it because it's based on a Marvel character. But this is the first Marvel movie where I've just been like, I just don't, like, nothing's really making me excited about this movie based on the trailers. And this clip, this 8 minute, the first 8 minutes of the movie they put online, it still doesn't do anything for me either. So, when it comes to like overall how I felt with these first 8 minutes for Kraven the Hunter, it didn't make my sentiment go up or down. I just felt meh on it. But I hope this movie ends up being a fun to great movie. And I kind of have a theory here in the fact that since Sony hasn't announced any other Sony less Spider-Man verse movies after this, I think this is maybe going to be the end of this whole like Sony less verse about like Spider-Man villains or supporting characters like Madam Web, because I think this is to me I feel like it's reached a point where it's become the DCU, the old DCU, where just nobody cares about these Sony versus Spider-Man movies, and the quality just hasn't been all that great with these movies. So like I said, I hope this movie ends up being good. I hope it's one of those movies where when I go and see it, I go like, okay, you know what? I wasn't excited for this, but it actually turn out to be fun. But these first 8 minutes just didn't really do anything for me personally. The next topic is Nosferatu, which I'm really excited for, the vampire movie coming out. It was directed by the director who did The Northman, which is a movie that I love. That's coming out in December. The first reaction is saying this is one of the best horror movies of the year, and it sounded like the first reactions are great. Which most first reactions are really good. I always say this when I talk about first reactions for movies. Most of the time, first reactions tend to sound great. Outside of the Joker 2, which was like shown at a festival, and I got a mixed reaction, and then when the first reactions came out for Joker 2, where it was like people actually seeing it when it's like was officially released, the reactions weren't good. So that doesn't always happen with first reactions. There are examples where not every movie gets good first reactions. But I love what I'm hearing about this movie, saying how the acting's great, it's creepy, it's one of the best horror movies of the year. I love hearing that. The only controversial thing from these reactions, it sounds like not everybody was happy with the way Nosferatu looks in the movie. It does, because I can tell from the trailers, obviously not going for the classic design, but I don't have a problem with that personally. Like if they change the look around and make it look really different, for me, I'll see for myself in a movie whether I'm gonna like the look how Nosferatu looks in the movie. Like we haven't really seen much of the character in the trailers to get a vibe of how he looks. I can definitely tell in the trailers at least they're going for like a different type of look, but all the reactions outside of the look of the main Nosferatu character, it sounds like this is going to be a great horror movie. So I'm hoping this movie lives up to those reactions because this to me is one of my most excited movies. One of the movies I'm most excited for in December. So the next topic is I Know What You Did Last Summer Legacy sequel they have started filming with this movie. I don't know if it's like gonna be I'm not sure it's supposed to be a direct sequel to the original and the second, or it's like a no and a second. I'm not sure. But I do love the first I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I enjoyed the second one. It's kind of like the second one to me was just kind of forgettable. Not as good as the first one, but I didn't hate it. And I know there was a third I Know What You Did Last Summer movie with a completely new cast of characters, and it had like a supernatural twist to it. I think I remember seeing it once, but it's like one of those movies that was so it was really bad, and I just don't remember much from it when I watched it the one time. But I'm glad to see filming is on the way for this movie because I do love the first I Know What You Did Last Summer movie, and it does sound like Freddie Prinze Jr., Jennifer Love Hewitt, it sounds like they all going to be back. It was confirmed they're coming back, which I'm glad to hear that. I know Samuel Shogo put up like a tweet or post or something, and it made it like people were thinking like, is she going to come back? I didn't take that as like coming back, and also a character died in the first movie, so I just don't think it would make any sense to have her come back when her character did die in the first movie. And the first movie's pretty grounded. It's not like there's those supernatural elements in this franchise outside of the third one where you can like bring a dead character back. So I didn't really take that as a sign that maybe Michelle character's gonna come back because she died in the first movie, so it just wouldn't make sense. But I'm glad filming is on the way for this. I Know What You Did Last Summer sequel. I'm hoping this turns out to be one of those great legacy sequels and not a bad one. But I'm excited to see filming has started for this movie. The next thing, and this is and the next topic is a new Snow White trailer came out, and I know this trailer was leaked like a couple of days ago. So I do find it kind of weird that Disney took this long to put out like the official version of this trailer, the second trailer, when it was leaked like a couple of days ago. So I thought that was bizarre. But when it comes to the second trailer for Snow White, now when it came to the first trailer, Snow White, I'll admit my reaction to that first trailer is that I was just kind of on it. Like it was fine to me. I know a lot of people hated that first trailer. I didn't personally think much of it. I'm not like a Snow White person. Unless somebody use like a test or original Snow White animated movie, the idea of a Snow White live action movie just doesn't really interest me. I'll say when it comes to the second trailer, I do think this trailer is better. I still think the CGI and the dwarfs look really just bad and like just look odd to me, and just overall they look fake in the trailer. I still think the CGI for the dwarfs doesn't look too great, but overall I think this is a better trailer than the first trailer. I'm still not like highly anticipating the Snow White live action movie. It's like I'll say this. I have slightly more interest in the Snow White movie over Kraven, but it's not by much. Like this trailer was a better trailer. Like I would say this is at least a decent trailer, the second Snow White trailer, but I'm still not like excited for the Snow White movie. I think overall, I do think the trailer does a better job with the story, and it does look like it could be maybe good, but my excitement for it just isn't really there. So to me this is a better trailer than the first Snow White trailer, but I'm still not gonna lie and sit here and say I'm really excited for the Snow White movie. So I know I hope this is one of those movies that turns out to be good, because I believe it's coming out next year. I can't remember the date or month, but maybe this will be one of those surprise movies next year. But I'll admit the trailers really haven't like grabbed me. Better trailer than the first one slightly, but not enough to make me say I'm excited for the Snow White movie. So the last topic is Kevin Feige was talking about the Inhuman characters and the Eternal characters. Will we ever see the debut of the Inhuman characters? I know we had that ABC Inhumans TV show that lasted this season, but that was back then when you had, I believe, I think the name of the guy was Jeff Loeb, who was in charge of the television department of Marvel back then when television and MCU films weren't connected. So I don't really, Kevin Feige had nothing to do with that Inhumans show. I know originally that was gonna be a movie, and then they decided to turn it into a TV show. And look, the TV show was bad. And then with the Eternals movie, I know with the Eternals movie, that movie only made like 402 at the box office. It got like a 47% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like I think it was the first YN MCU movie. And I personally love the Eternals movie. Like it's not perfect. Like I think the villain could have been done better. I think with the fact that we had 10 lead characters, I think you needed to cut that cast down when it comes to just I would have just had like a few internal characters in the first movie, and then you could introduce the second rest of the internal characters in the second movie. I think you just had too many lead characters for one movie, especially with a movie where you're trying to introduce these 10 lead characters for the first time, where it's not like the Avengers where you had movies before that to see the backstory of like all these characters like Captain America, Hawk, Iron Man, Thor. So I think that was one of the other issues with the Eternals movie for me. Is just you had too many characters that you're trying to introduce, whereas Avengers you had movies beforehand to really get to know these characters. But overall, I did love the Eternals movie. Like I think that's an underappreciated movie. I think it's an underrated movie, and I like the fact it felt different from the usual MCU movies. But the movie didn't make a lot of money, and it didn't do all that. It didn't do well critically with the critics. I know with the audience, it has like a 76, 78% on Rotten Tomatoes, so the audience seemed to enjoy it more. But it was the first Martin movie. So Kevin Feige was saying that, he talked about how you had Black Bolt and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and how, we could see the tone of characters, we could see the Inhumans make their debuts, and I hope they do, because he gave like a kind of a positive update on those characters, where he was saying a possibility of it. He just said, talking about Tony's movie, he said, we're very proud of that movie. That cast was incredible. We're lucky to get any of them back at some point. And he just messed in with the Eternals that they showed up. Blackboard at least showed up in the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So I do think with Blackboard showing up in the Doctor Strange sequel movie, I do think that was a hint that we will see. We did get a debut of one of the Inhuman characters in that movie. Obviously, it's the multiverse, so that one got killed off. You could introduce like the actual Inhumans MCU. And look, I would love to see Inhumans film, and I would love to see an Eternal sequel. Now, I don't think you get an Eternal sequel. I do think, even though Kevin Feige is saying it sounds like we will see these characters again, I do think if we see the Eternals again, it's going to be in other MCU movies and more as kind of like supporting characters. Like, I would love to see an Eternal sequel. But I think most likely, even though it's great to hear I'm glad to see a positive update and him saying that it sounds like maybe they've at least talked about seeing these characters. And I would be probably more interested to see the Eternal characters than the Inhumans again, because the Inhumans show was so bad. But I do think we'll see the Eternal characters, but my guess, even with this update, is that we're probably gonna see them in supporting roles, like in other MCU projects and other movies and TV shows. And also like another reason why I would love to see an Eternals movie, even though I don't think it's gonna happen, is to see all this like Eternals was left on a major cliffhanger. Like they showed in the Captain America movie, you're all gonna see that Celestial that's in the ocean. But the first Eternals movie was left on a major cliffhanger with that big Celestial being taking some of the Eternals to judge them. And I would like to see them kind of like, I'm hoping it's a positive update, even though I don't think it's likely. I hope this means that even if we don't get an Eternal sequel, we at least get them in other movies to wrap up that story. Because that is a pretty big loose stint at the end of that first movie, and I would like to see them wrap that up at some point. But I mean, it's good to see a positive update. And when it comes to Inhumans, even though the Inhumans show was terrible, I still wouldn't mind. Like I still would like to see an Inhumans movie. Like I wouldn't mind seeing the Inhumans get a second chance when it comes to just like I don't know, like do a new cast and just pretend that show didn't happen. Because in my opinion, I've said this. Look, when it came to all the stuff before, all the TV stuff beforehand, Kevin Feige wasn't involved in that stuff. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Inhumans, I know there was the One Away show, there was the Cloak and Dagger show, but those aren't, he wasn't involved in those projects. Now, with the Daredevil show, they're obviously deciding to change the idea of making Daredevil Born Again an actual, like, the new Daredevil show to make it actually season 4, not just having the same actor. So, I mean, you could do a thing, maybe bring back the Inhumans actors, but, give them just, hopefully, maybe a better show, a better movie. But I would be excited to see the Inhumans again if you just do them well. Because the Inhumans are all great characters in the comics. And I think there is stuff you could really explore that could be interesting depending on if you execute it well. Because I always say this with comic book characters. Just because the first attempt at those characters was terrible, that doesn't mean you don't have great stories and they aren't great characters in the comics that you could you can make a great movie or show out of. That first Inhumans show definitely left a bad taste in people's mouths, so I do think you're gonna have to work really hard to like if you do an Inhumans show again, or if you do an Inhumans movie, in my opinion, you really gotta do a better job this time. And I would trust Marvel with the Inhumans project again if Kevin Feige's more involved now, and and they actually like I would prefer to see an Inhumans movie, but I would be excited to see Inhumans again. I'm glad to see there's a positive update on those two teams because I do think at some point down the road, I can see them bringing the Inhumans in. I can see them seeing the Eternals again, but maybe in other characters' movies. But at least it's good to hear a positive update about those two teams when it comes to Inhumans and the Eternals. So that's all the movie topics today. Until next time, movie fans.